we are joined by the top 4 women architects in India. Please welcome architect Kohelika Kohli from K2 India. We have Sonali Bhagwati from DPA. We have Sabina Khanna from Studio Kia. And last but not the least, and who doesn't need an introduction, architect Sonali Rastogi from Morphogenesis. Welcome on board, ladies. I can't begin to tell you what a pleasure it is, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation. As you are all aware, we are tackling the topic of pandemic versus pandemonium. So let us see what's actually happening around us. And now that we know what's happening around us, how are we going to get past this? From the prolific profession that all of you command, from architecture and understanding the manipulation of space and how life should be shaped up around us. I will start with Kohelika on this. We're looking at our first point of discussion, the evolution warp. Kohelika, what do you feel, when we look at how this entire situation has surrounded us? What are the critical roles that architects and designers would play in a global emergency like this?
I think firstly, it's taken all of us by shock and by surprise. I think none of us expected the extent of what this would do to us. For me, on a personal level, I've realized I need to balance my life out a lot more. But as an architect, I have to say, I think I've realized that we actually have a moral duty as well to the environment that we live in. And that is something I want to actually reflect on and get my studio to reflect on a lot more. I don't know. I mean, I know Sonali does a lot of large work. I, of course, I do more homes than public work. I think what we put out in the public sphere of things needs to be thought through a lot more now, especially after something like this. I mean, I kept thinking about how when you make public spaces, they should be able to be actually multi-usable. You see the desperation of how immigrants who were moving had no place to go. We were unable to transform public spaces into spaces where we could possibly accommodate them. So it's something we need to think about. I don't know what the rest of you have in mind, but that is something that has stayed with me.
Okay. So on that note, Sonali, may I address this question to Sonali Bhagwati? What do you think are the said unique expertise of your community that should be dwelt upon or focused upon to deal with or to come up with solutions for emergencies like this, since we've not ever really faced something like this? In terms of space manipulation, space management, the way we manage the spaces around us, the space that we live in.
There is two ways of looking at this. First, of course, this is adversity. It's taken all of us by shock. Nobody really expected it. But the thing that we humans are capable of doing is converting adversity into advantage, and try and see what are the takeaways from this. On an immediate basis, of course, as a community, as a design fraternity, our contribution can be in a very direct way, which is, let's say, helping out with your emergency healthcare facilities, design of equipment, design of, let's say, seat covers, design of personal protection equipment, and a lot of other such things, which could be going from one field to another seamlessly. So those are the immediate, direct kind of places where the fraternity can definitely engage in. But I think what we need to do as a community, as a fraternity, is to think, what is it that we are taking away from this? What is it that really sort of is the essence that has come out of this whole pandemic? And that has a lot of ramifications. Like, for example, one knows that the only constant in life is change. And the pandemic has affected us in more ways than one, and in more ways than we realize. We've seen the air quality change. We've seen the sky turn blue. We've seen butterflies and birds chirping. And all the elements are telling us that we are doing just fine without you all, So this is one big realization that has, struck one and all completely. The pandemic is changing our thought process. Our priorities in physical and emotional priorities are changing. And business strategies as well as design have to constantly evolve to adapt to this, you know. So this is really where we have to think long term, and maybe there are some things which could be immediate, some things which are intermediate, like you know, planning of public places where you are addressing the ramifications of the pandemic. But the long term, which is eventually, because this pandemic, God willing, in a year and a half, should be way behind us. And hopefully we should have bounced back, like how it has happened all over the world in history. But what are we taking away from this? What have we learned from this? And how are we going to apply that? Is the main essence that the fraternity needs to take from this. And that I have a whole lot of points of which I'll come to in the next question.
Right. Thank you for that, Sonali. Moving on with the next point with Sonali Rastogi. Sonali, how do you feel we should collaborate across different sectors, you know, to support mitigation, to understand how different sectors of society, how differently profession people should be coming together to, you know, create a comprehensive experience to better our livelihood in the coming years?
So I think, you know, I'll take a few clues from what Sonali had said about, you know, every time in history, there's something major that happens and then we adapt. So I want to call those periods as times of paradigm change. And, you know, one paradigm change happened after industrialization. This is the time for another paradigm change. And I think we need to think about what have we done to, when I look at the topic for today, which says pandemic/pandemonium, what is the pandemonium we've created that has led to the pandemic? Okay, it's not a slash. I think it's a pandemonium we created that has led to the pandemic. Okay, right. So I think the very fact that we are herding together the way we do in small pockets of high density, high rise mega cities. Okay, we are talking about creating solution for migrant workers, but there are cities like Delhi which have 50% of their people who are migrant workers who go home once a year, maybe twice a year. Like, why does humanity have to live like that? On one side, we are talking about community living and learning from our community. Community is first your own family. 50% of this city lives in such a way that they're away from their family for majority of their life, and they squat in these cities. So I think it's high time that as architects and as designers, we raise our voice collectively and become part of the nation building exercise, which is that of sharing the world in a more equitable way, and which is that of a decentralized master plan. And for India, especially, we need a decentralized master plan. People don't need to herd up to 4 cities for everything they do. We still do production of goods in the center of our mega cities. We will have some tiny little garment producing backend happening on the 12th floor of some slum rehabilitation colony in Mumbai. We will have industrial production happening in the center of Delhi. Okay, so what is the reason to do this? Okay, if you looked at a mathematical calculation, we have enough land area for everybody. Nobody has to squat on anything. Nobody has to live in the filth they do. So I think this is a good time that distancing is understood as distancing. And therefore we need to decentralize. People need to be close to their homes, to their communities. Then this is how the nation should be rebuilt. So when we are going to go down to zero and negative, as all of you who understand economics have been reading, then the rebooting is how? Is not when will the vaccine come out and when will we go back to living in this crazy way. So in my opinion, we brought ourselves to a level of craziness in our built habitat. And that is the multinodal, decentralized nation building plan that all of us designers, architects, planners, urban designers, we need to work together collectively.
I think I quite agree with you on that. On that note, as Sonali said, this reminds me of an article in the newspaper today by David Sloan, and a few comments by Sir Ratan Tata as of a couple of days back that, we need to look at de-slumming. He's spoken about de-slumming the cities and figuring out better ways of habitation. On that note, Sabina, what do you feel that as stakeholders of the built environment, what do we learn from this entire experience, and how do you feel that we should take the next few steps forward, because those few steps forward will now pave a different method, a different path?
I will just take on from what the earlier speakers have actually said, that yes, we have been hit by unprecedented and unpredicted times, which none of us ever imagined. And we are going through difficult times, and each one is going to emerge out of this in a different way. It's not each of the segment of society is going to be impacted in a different way out of this. So is going to be impacted in a different way by this. And so the solutions have got to be multifarious and varied out of this. As architects who understand space, who create and craft spaces, it is imperative for us now to be creating some things which are more relevant, and things which have more meaning, and like we mentioned about distancing or de-slumming that you're mentioning, is probably we need to make those nodes slightly away from our workplaces. So either we are talking of trying to do something called as urban villages, maybe away from our main course of working, or we are talking of doing in turn a rural empowerment, so that we actually have is a reverse exodus, and we do not have that migration happening from the rural segments. Hence, we do not have our urban centers getting overpopulated. So it's somewhere a balance of both, where we need is create those urban villages where the urban people can actually go and find solace, and also do as a rural empowerment at that level, so that we do not have that, those crowds coming into the urban segment.
I am going to risk a slight amount of controversy here when I'm going to ask you that, do you feel, when we look at decongestive measures or de-slumming or, shifting the centralization of manufacturing or congestive measures, do you feel that town planning, something which is essentially, looked at by the government of India, should be at least semi-private, if not completely private? Because I feel that there are a lot of architects and a lot of, people from the architecture community and fraternity who could make a lot of difference in terms of their more holistic way of looking at how habitation in terms of commercial or residential could be manipulated. If the entire understanding of the subject was more prolific, because right now I feel, there are only a group of people who look at it from a very traditional perspective. But we need to grow on those grounds. We need to look at other measures. We need to understand that it's not just about rising vertically, but actually using land in a much more sensible manner. We can do things, which are more low rise. We can do things which are natural products, sourced locally, instead of going, haywire and trying to figure out how to make the whole situation westernized.
I'll take this on and actually say that yes, architects definitely need to be a part of the larger planning process. As it is, we have to start proving ourselves and make ourselves more relevant in nation building. That's very important, alongside urban designers, and because architects bring that kind of an expertise that is so relevant. So we have to, be a part of this entire process of nation building, which is very important. And we actually play a very major and a crucial role in that. And also alongside, technology plays a very important role in shaping up our spaces of tomorrow and the kind of spaces that we need now.
So right. I want to add to this by talking, see, the architecture has two sides of it. There's the architect who has a creative vision, and there's a seat of power. Okay, from times immemorial, historically, so-and-so ruler has decided to build a city, and then so-and-so, even for us, when Chandigarh was commissioned to Corbusier, it was to kind of make a new India, which is unfettered by the presence of the past. Okay, and even when our ill-founded, Telangana project that was to happen, and then it became a Bahubali project or some other, whatever happened to it. And now we are suffering our own Central Vista project in Delhi. Now, the thing is that I believe without, it's not singularly up to architects. Architects are, at the end of the day, they rely on patronage. Okay, they have to. Okay, they provide the intellectual bandwidth. Sorry, just give me a, but at the end of the day, it's the vision of the people, especially in the democracy. That vision is headed by our leaders. As long as there is no vision, and the only vision is that of megalomania, okay, which is apparent. It's going on to us now. As we are sitting in this epidemic, it is happening to our own city. We are building masses and masses and masses of ill thought out, non-public involvement Central Vista project in our city, which is going to be the most watched project in the entire world.
Sonali, I want to ask you something. Since Ranjita has already touched on something so controversial, if we talk about the redevelopment of the Central Vista, right? And I know this is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, but it's a city I think most of us have been born and lived in, right? And the reality of it is, you said there are two parts to it. There's an architect, and then there's who I call the patron, the guy who's going to pay for it. But it is also, this is what I meant by saying that I think we architects, not just because of this pandemic, but even before that, have a moral duty. Yeah. Now, at the end of the day, what is planned for the Central Vista project cannot be built without us architects. And you, because you work a lot more in the public sector, and I, because I have someone in my family who's studied this so intensely, and I know how it started, what happened. It is regrettable that we as architects are part and parcel of this, because they can't do this project without us. Correct?
So I won't comment on what the current situation, but trust me, they can. Trust me, they can, because there has to be fairness and democracy in the system. Okay, if there is a system that says all public projects have to be open to public competition and blah, blah, whatever. However, we do know that most of the city is getting built through the Central Public Works Department today, leave alone the Central Vista project. And then the Central Public Works Department can go out and give it to anyone they feel like, right? And there is no, and for me, it's not about who is building it, which architect or anything like that. But it's the taxpayers' money. They are the clients.
Building it responsibly.
Also, and it has to be built responsibly. It has to be put out in public domain. There is no public consultation. It is not put out in public domain.
Feedback from the public on what their opinion is. What is the change?
Anywhere else in the world.
So one more thing I wanted to say is that, you see, as architects, we've always been saying that planning of the city in terms of what should come up, what should not come up, needs to be based on a much larger study. And that has never been done, because all the time the planners are looking at a very 2D, very number-oriented kind of a perspective, which is very flat. There is no depth to that perspective. There's no other dimension to it. And unless you involve architects and urban designers who can give a vision for the city, who can actually say that, okay, one is what kind of urban form, what mass of urban form should come up or should not come up, or how you want to plan it out, how you want to envisage the growth. The numbers can come from the planners, but the solutions can be generated through architectural thought, and urban thought. And that is completely missing at the moment. And that's where we have to come in.
There is no vision document.
There is no vision document. That's the problem.
No, and something actually Sabina was talking about, which I find so interesting. She was saying about rural empowerment. I think it's 87 acres of public land. I mean, we're talking about just one subject, but 87 acres of public land that we're taking to do this whole redevelopment of the Central Vista project. I mean, if people like Sabina came on board and talked about this, because it's amazing. I mean, I run besides being an architect, as a lot of you know, I design furniture, and we run a factory, and most of my workers come from don't belong to Delhi. And, and it's sad, because they come and they live 3 people on top of each other in these rented places. And I feel I, as an employer, also have a responsibility towards them for their health. But options also run out. There is no space. The rentals are so high for these guys. And why not utilize these funds, the space, if we really have to take it away from the public sector to give back? So, I mean, it's just a sad situation currently, but I hope we learn something.
But that was some very interesting feedback. Sabina, I think we will go on to the next topic with you. So when we look at architecture, all these years we've always spoken about creating spaces that bring people together. It's about inculcating social movement. It's about telling our children to step away from their iPads and their phones to be going out in the park. It's about taking a walk in the park for the elderly. Generally public spaces. Now this is what good architecture is supposed to be doing. Yet now, because of the social distancing, people are abandoning the most iconic public spaces. But if we had to go back to these public spaces, but with a semblance of how we need to shape those public spaces to cater to us and how we respond to them, right? So undermining this entire essence, how do you feel about it? So can we start with Sabina on this?
So, okay, Ranjita, yes, we are going through these times where we do need to have social distancing. What I just started off with, that creating of spaces as architects, we understand and we create spaces both personal and public. So anything beyond the realm of my gate is a public space, whether it be the street outside, or I'm talking about the road, my neighborhood, market, the parks, and beyond that, all the commercial and the public and the other spaces that we have. And it is now for us in these times, and let's hope that these times are very temporary and they do not last forever. And so we need to be more resilient to the kind of environment and start creating more agile spaces, that can actually adapt to the kind of usage that we envisage for them tomorrow and make them a more safer and a more healthier environment. I do agree that today all of these spaces are empty and they're nobody's there using the kind of spaces. But it's for us now to think of what is the kind of usage and how to transform them so that they do come alive tomorrow, and yet we are able to maintain that social distancing, which is very important for everybody's health and safety.
Right. On that note, we have Akriti Kapoor writing in to us with a question that we constantly look at economy as linear. Thoughts on changing to a more circular economy in the context of built environment where we are reusing and not refusing. How do you feel about that? Sonali Bhagwati, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have a few thoughts on this. You see, now in today's date, we can't have rigid and long-term strategies. Strategic planning needs to be built into the daily operations in order to respond to market dynamics and new technologies. Models that address flexi working, work from home, etc., need to be developed. Agility, which is what Sabina also talked about, as a concept needs to be explored. Smaller teams which are fluid in size and form may be more appropriate. Network of specialist freelancers can be roped in for on project basis, So these are all these issues that address the circular economy. People need to develop the softer skills like collaboration and critical thinking, and these things are not replaceable by technology. Basic work is replaceable by technology, but thinking and creative work is not really replaceable, and that's what you need to really concentrate on. We need to discard the idea of owning everything. The whole idea of owning a corporation, owning its own building and its own furniture and its own office and own everything is now becoming like a white elephant, and that needs to start going away. One is now beginning to look at much smaller, leaner organizations. Even the kind of space that each organization has can be completely re-evaluated, because any office building that you say, or any sort of environment that you take, is not active for, is active, let's say, for about 10 hours in a day. So how does one sort of make that more usable over a larger period of time? Even within an office, at least 20, 25, 30% of workspaces are at any point of time empty. And this is a standard data. how does one start looking at using all that much more efficiently? So all these are the kind of things that we need to start looking at, and these are the essence of the takeaways from this pandemic. How to start optimizing, and optimizing at all levels. It will be at the level of space utilization, at the level of working, at the level of organizational structures. It goes across the board. Future workplaces may become, you see, let's say if you take co-working, that's probably the beginning of this whole sharing economy that we are looking at, and you get other people to share your spare workspaces, your spare resources, so that there is optimum usage of everything. And this is extremely important, and I think this is going to be a takeaway that is going to be there with us for many, many years to come. The sort of white elephants are now beginning to go away, and this leaner, meaner kind of organizations are going to be a part of the whole story. Outsourcing can become more prevalent, and even things like design practices. One doesn't have to have everything happening in your own office. You could have smaller centers. It's a new business model perhaps, where you create these smaller centers all over, where small teams can go plug in. You have the design libraries, you have material libraries, you access all of that, and it's like a pay and play kind of a story that you could start creating. So everything that could be shared optimally needs to be looked at, and resources which are just lying vacant should be re-evaluated. So this is where it starts affecting the economy.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonali. I believe, Akriti, that your question has been more than adequately answered. We will move on to the next question, which has actually been posted by an anonymous attendee, but it's quite interesting because it's about designing homes. I shall address this question to architect Koelika Kohli. The question goes like, what about designing homes which are safe, the way masks, keeping individuals, or sanitization? I think whatever you are talking already is prevalent in developed countries. So how about designing homes in India, which can actually inculcate this?
I have, when I think about this question, I think, and I may say something which may upset a few people, but what I want to say is that I think as Indians, and especially those of us who are privileged, we already live within our homes. We function within our homes. And we already have this opinion that as long as our home is clean, it doesn't really matter what's happening elsewhere. I don't know how many of you, at least on the panel, agree with me or not. But it's like kachra agar bahar hai, to theek hai, as long as it's not in our home. Of course, I mean, there's a lot of technology which people are investing in to deal with what the question is about. Whether it is, I mean, let's face it, whether it's public buildings, whether it's home, most of my projects pump in a large amount of funds into clean air, right? And recycling of air, and how much oxygen there is in air. And so there is a lot happening already in the Western world and in our world, where we are already dealing with things like that. However, I think after something like COVID-19, and even before, the question is to actually say, is it just really about our homes? How do we actually create a cleaner environment in general? I don't think just being able to have clean air within our homes, or sanitized homes, is the answer to move forward. Because again, that ability lies only with the privileged few. I think the answer really lies in improving things all around us, so that we don't need to spend so much money. And I'm sure all of you who design in the public world and in the commercial sector realize the quantum of money we are pumping in to eradicate a problem. We are always pumping in to eradicate a problem. Why do we not work towards avoiding a problem, so we don't have to work towards eradicating it?
Yeah, it's like creating pollution, and then after that saying, let's do smog eating towers.
Yeah, it's
why should a house
also your public spaces? Today, your public spaces are no man's land. Everyone has that nice little, control
And
areas, your little oasis where you're sitting. And then you go to another oasis in a sealed car because you don't want to deal with the outdoors, or you go into another oasis, which is your public, which is your park. But you always avoid, because your public domain is like your dustbin, where all the rubbish has been dumped. And I mean, literally and, metaphorically speaking. And I think as designers, we need to take on this as a social responsibility. But again, as Sonali had said, that, working with the authorities is extremely important, because they are the implementers. We are the people who can design, who can put it all together, but the implementation still will remain with them. And they need to partner with us to make sure that our public domain, from all points of view, whether it is literal garbage or living conditions or seamless, mobility from your public transport to your home, or whichever way you want to call it, becomes as nice and as exciting and as safe as your own private domain.
So I want to take off on the public and mobility conversation, and I think that will address the question number 3 and 4. There's a question on livability, and there's a question on commercial development and densification. So look at where we are. We say that we need transport-oriented development, right? Which means from FSI of 1.5, we went to 2.25 and 3.5, and now in various parts of the country, we are going to 5 and 6, which means not only are we densifying people close to transport and metros, then we are also going five floors below ground. And then we will say, now how do we clean out the air from 5 floors below ground? And we are going 70 floors, 80 floors above, but now we'll say no touch lift. Okay. And we'll say, now we are creating placemaking and urban space, which is the one plaza, which is at the entry of the metro. Okay. Now I want to just rewind back. There was also a model of development for which actually Indian architects, late Sri Korea and Doshi sir, have also received so many awards. Low-rise, high density, no lift, community spaces, clusters, human scale. And oddly enough, I live in a fairly small colony which has further cut itself up into bits and pieces. So now maybe a cluster of 150 homes form half of North Panchsheel where I live. Now suddenly we are all remembering community. You see, in the face of a pandemic, we are saying, okay, let's lock our gate because we are all safe for each other, because we know each other by face, don't know each other much else. We know each other by face, so we are safe. Okay, one park is open in the colony. We are willing to walk with each other 1 meter apart for a morning walk, but let alone, God forbid, somebody from Shapurjat walks into it because we don't know the guy, right? So we are moving back to trusting our own community. While some of this behavior is very, I think, not acceptable. Having said that, the crux of it is, I'm trusting my community. Am I ever going to be able to trust going in a metro to a 4 FSI, 50 high rises, 70 floors high? Am I ever going to be able to trust that location ever again? So I come back, I keep harping on that it's not that we have to sanitize that 4 FSI place. It is my colleagues, my classmates, my seniors from architecture school who are sitting in government departments and making these laws. Those architects need to have responsibility. They can't turn around and say every time some edge of Delhi starts becoming expensive, like Gurgaon, come on, quickly raise FSI and sell more FSI to people to develop. And then after that, what do we do? Put a cloak around it to clean it. So I think the issue is not sanitization at all. At all. It is just the way we have exploited Earth.
Yeah.
We need to stop exploiting it. I mean, look at it. In 45 days, we have cleaner air than ever. Earth will sort itself out. No reason to have a mask around the house or a Western type of sanitization or anything. It's not required. We stop abusing. Yeah. We just stop abusing Earth, and that's it. All solutions are there. In 45 days, 45 years of abuse has rectified itself. The water of the Ganges is flowing cleaner than the entire publicity campaign of the last 10 years to clean it has cost us some, I don't know how many.
Exactly. This is what I mean. We're always trying to fix a problem. Why can't we figure out?
How about get to where there's no problem?
Yeah.
How about get to that? Okay, so I really think that next time we are getting a new master plan of Delhi 2021 with extra FSI incentive to develop this, develop that, blah blah, or whatever or the other. We really need to have our heads examined. We really need to, And next time we want to do 6 basements, and we really need to have our heads examined.
No, I think that's exactly where an urban planner and architectural community needs to be partnering with the authorities, because that's what I'm saying. They don't think, they just think in a flat 2-dimensional way with just numbers. And they don't think of the urban mass. They don't think of a lifestyle. They don't think of mobility. They don't think of 100 other things which an urban designer or an architect think about.
They don't think about livability. They don't
Yes.
think about how humans should live. They make up ways where they imagine how humans should live.
I mean, even now, I mean, I'm facing this. I mean, we're all facing problems. All our sites are closed. We can't, and there's only that much drawing work we can manage. And when we talk about restarting our sites, which really means we can only restart such sites when these migrant workers also come back. But are we going to change the way we exploit them? Are we going to change their lifestyle for them? Why did they all run? Why did they all run home? It's really something for us to think about, that they were in such a rush to just get out. That means we do, should, and as an employer, as someone who's part of the construction community, should we not be thinking about, do they have insurance? Do they have health insurance? Do they have insurance to cover all these problems, rather than now worrying about, now that they've run home or they've gone home, how do we even restart? Because currently we are dependent on them. We are highly dependent on them for our own workforce and for our own work to move forward.
So basically, we can very safely say that we are in general quite mismanaged when it comes to looking at a mass number of people coming together. Logistically, we do not know how to manage them. We do not know how to give them that health security factor that they're safe.
I think this is one big learning, that we have probably collectively ignored a huge part of humanity, who has made us possible. And it's time for us to rethink and give cognizance to their existence, and a good, right to life and right to good life is a part of your basic human right, and let's make sure that we give them that. I mean, costs, economics, and all that will have to sort itself out, but humanity is more important.
Yes, absolutely. On that note, in fact, the last question, I have a question here from Shivani Saxena, which I believe Sonali Rastogi has already everybody else has already adequately answered, but I'd still like to hear Sabina's feedback on this, that in our current urbanized world, discourse can only have sustainable outcomes if all stakeholders understand the intricate relationships between the various urban dimensions, including social ones. How can we provide a higher livability quotient in times to come? Before Sabina Khanna answers this, I would like to tell Shivani that maybe you can just start from your own self. We need to understand how each one of us conduct our lives. I mean, do we really use a bicycle? We can avoid using a car. Do we really understand the difference between wet waste and dry waste? Do we really recycle? Do we do that little bit of keeping the air immediately around us, maybe within 100 square meter radius, clean, the water clean? So if every one of us did their bit, I think the higher livability quotient factor would have actually had a higher probability factor than what we are discussing at the moment. Sabina, we'd love to hear your opinion on this.
Well, pretty much, Rangita, you have mentioned, and as Sonali did sum up and mentioned quite a bit about it. Like you said, yes, each of these factors have to begin from us. Each one of us is responsible of where we stand today, and each one of us has brought the world to where it is today. So the earth is our responsibility individually as well. And within this 45 days of a lockdown that we have, gone through, each one of us, we've ourselves realized that we have started to live minimally, and we can pretty much do it. We've started to conserve our resources. We've become more conscious about how we live and how we exist. So, and what we consume. And we've started becoming more empathic, and we started living with empathy towards everything. So this little 45 period of a time where we have restructured ourselves and our ways of looking at things is actually taught us of how we could have done this earlier, and rather, than bringing the world to this level.
Absolutely right, Sabina. In fact, we have a couple of more questions where people have said that why did it take a COVID-19 to wake up to collaboration factors? Let me answer the gentleman and say it did not take a COVID-19 for the architectural community to wake up to collaboration. It has always been a very active profile of architects who do some great work, because if you're doing large-scale projects, collaboration is one of the best mediums to bring some of the best minds together. So maybe you should, explore more and figure out where the collaboration is happening. Probably some diverse, exposure to the right kind of people would, bring about a change in your, in how you feel about it. We've got questions about how we solve social distancing issues in EWS housing areas. I believe before the architects get down to, social distancing issues in EWS areas, first thing we need to understand is that education has to go hand in hand with architects coming in to create spaces that can put social distancing and social meeting together. So individual personal education and the interest to learn towards a better livelihood is something that is always and will be permanently recommended. So I am hoping that this question would not be necessary to address with our architect.
Ranjita, I do want to take up, I have a very strong opinion on that. This is, which is on a positive note, that this is the time for us to really democratize education, because education has so lagged behind. I mean, I think it's probably one of the things which has lagged behind, like poverty alleviation in many countries where people are malnutrition, that there's no hope of catching up. At one level, as much as the distance grows between the rich and the poor, the distance between the quality of education is getting larger and larger. And we always talk about infrastructure for education. We have talked about getting digital is now, we've talked for 2 decades, digital is the new way, but this is the first time it actually is. It actually is. And I am convinced that one of the architectural buildings that will never be built the way it is being done now ever again is schools and colleges, which are right now places to collect 50 people in a space. And then you need a large number of 50 people, groups of 50, so that you can create a school or a college. I now think that people will have it, you will just have small spaces for teachers to come into blue rooms or caves, or because I also don't think we will be forever talking from a phone or from a screen. There will be more competent digital methods to communicate. I think that is the way. There'll be only spaces for individuals which are teachers, and students will have access to the best. So as students in, who come from privileged backgrounds in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, similar will be in the emergent towns, and the access to education and knowledge will be much more universal. There will no longer be buildings, like there will be digital infrastructure housing buildings. There will not be people housing buildings for education. So I think that is a typology that is going to completely change.
This is going to apply to even corporates.
Yeah.
This is going to apply across the board to many, many businesses. Wherever you can bring down the spaces and go digital, use technology to give the right experience, reach out even more. That's going to be the name of the game from now on.
And from one of the gentlemen who asked a question, that is how we can look forward to decongestion of what is already built. Because we can now look for qualitative spaces. And I mean, I'm imagining myself in one of those, Starship Enterprise ships and doing this, and everything is happening then with my hands.
I am Captain Spock.
Yeah, so I definitely think there is a better chance for democracy. There is a better chance for equality. And this COVID-19, which had democratically hit us all, is the opportunity, is a silver lining in the dark cloud that we have to think about. And where spaces, this megalomania to own this large space, as Sonali said, that will go away. It will go away.
I'm sure you're aware. I think it's a brilliant point about this democratized education, because I've signed up for a bunch of courses that I started doing. And because I don't know how many of you knew, almost all the Ivy League universities in America started offering free online classes. So classes that they usually charged for, they were offered for free, and you basically had to sign up and get onto it, and you had to follow the curriculum. And it's fantastic because it doesn't matter whether you can afford it or you can't afford it. I've gone back to studying history, which I used to love, but I never got enough time to continue reading. So it's really a brilliant point that you brought up, and I agree. Also, how we can reuse some of the amazing buildings that are currently, even the government has uses some of the most amazing buildings in the city are run by government, and unfortunately they have not been able to manage the upkeep of those buildings.
They made mincemeat out of it.
Yeah.
Keema kofta is what they have created out of it. Allow me to say that one. Oh
You're
my
absolutely
goodness.
right. Because that space management of those buildings is very important, and we really do not need those large spaces.
But can you imagine what can become of them? What can happen if we
government offices
and reinvent those buildings?
Large
government organizations have huge space standards. I mean, like at a slightly upper level, you'll find people with offices of 300 and 400 square feet each.
It's
amazing the kind of space standards they have, and they want to stick. This is mine. This whole question of mine has to go away.
Sonali, I've even designed government buildings with offices for personal officers to the extent of 1,200 square feet.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And I was also designing residential complexes where I was doing 3 BHKs in 1,200. It was so difficult to comprehend and design both those spaces for one man and for a family of 15,
Yes.
Very difficult to be
actually. So I think that's whole owning of everything has to disintegrate.
That's
a big takeaway.
I can just imagine how some of the most prolific government buildings in the country would be looking like right now, minus the lakhs of footfalls that happen through it. They must be an absolute architectural marvel. Yes. Otherwise, when it is completely congested and the sanitation is deplorable and there is no upkeep, there's no proper cleaning, there is no proper maintenance, it is almost like you are allowing a beautiful giant to just fall apart and stand back and watch it crumbling, which is so sad. On that note, we have a question from architect Manish Dixit that he asks us that how will, as professionals, architects, plan future growth in public housing and depopulate urban centers? Let's accept the fact it wasn't a mess earlier, except for a few cases. Of course, we accept that. It's in a mess even now, in spite of the social distancing, because that's compulsory. It's a compulsion. It's been imposed on us. If it wasn't, we would still be calling it a terrible mess. But yes, how do we look at planning this future growth of public housing and depopulation of urban centers?
Who do you want to take?
Please, decide. Who would like to go for it? Sabina, would you like to address this?
Okay, so we're talking of public housing, we're talking of large numbers of people who are going to be inhabiting that, So there are now our learnings from the pandemic that what we have is a few components that are going to become essential to residential living and residential complexes is going to be the incorporation of certain health standards. But before that, the very unit itself, the incorporation of balconies, of open spaces, of breakaway spaces for people to breathe and live and conduct their daily chores, so that they're not confined to the four walls, to the built areas, becomes very important. So the outdoor breathing community spaces for each individual, and then at a little society level will become very important. The plugging in of health facilities within each housing complex will need to become integral. Learning from work from home situations, it will become integral in public housings to have spaces from where people can work. They still don't, post-pandemic, do not need to go to their offices every day commuting. If we have been working fine now, they could use that as breakaway times during a week and still have work from home spaces, which are not exactly from their apartments or their homes, but could be within their larger community that they have within their development. There would definitely need to be beginnings of working spaces as well that are required, within a larger framework. And most definitely, of course, like we've been mentioning about the high FSIs and the so much of ground coverages and all that, the public housing, we will definitely need to look for a significant change in the regulatory modifications. Those definitely need to be modified. We do not have to just abide by those FSIs, etc. We need to ensure that self-distancing has to be maintained even post-pandemic, because we are not going to be free of the virus, which is a utopian situation. We are going to be living with it for years to come, Only it would be a weaker strain, but we have to plan as if we are living with it. And some of those, regulations that we are going with today are going to be maintained and carried forward.
Thank you on that, Sabina. Though we have a lot of questions pouring in, we're going to take just 2 more questions for the time being before moving on with our topic of discussion. We have a question from Abhijit Shah as to how to address the agile working culture. Will we see the agile concept going ahead, or would agile working be a thing of the past? I think I'll address this question with Sonali Rastogi.
Agile working, I mean, we're already doing that, right? We are now learning to work very effectively from home. I mean, agile, earlier when somebody talked about agile, it became just workstations that went up and down, and so that you could be more healthy and not sit all day long. But definitely agility will come from decentralization, for sure. If your workforce, instead of sitting in one office and with a 50,000 square feet IT floor, if it can now sit in, let's not even say home for a moment. Let's say for human beings, social interaction is required for work. So let's say they sit it, but nobody is traveling like from Faridabad to Dwarka to work. Say there are centers, even for a Delhi office, in 5 different areas in NCR. So that itself will bring a certain amount of agility. And I think that will bring a little precision, it will bring a little agility. And there's no choice but for that to happen. Because density of human habitation is what humans will deplore. That's it. They will not want to be in crowded spaces. They will not want to be hugging with their hands, holding up in the trains and going, and no space to bring the hand down once it goes up. So that sort of situation is going to be avoidable. And everybody has learned that equally. It is no longer a domain of the CEO who doesn't want to be crowded in. It is now everybody's right not to be crowded in. And so therefore it will become smaller. And it will become, and maybe these workplaces then become more personal. Maybe they are no longer 50 square feet per person crammed in, because you don't want to be so close to another person. And it is no longer just going to be the want of the individual. The group is not going to want that. So communities, whether they are work communities, will police their own health and hygiene. Whether they are residential communities, they will police their own health and hygiene, like my RWA is happily doing right now on a chat. So I think that is the fact that your wellness is my problem and my wellness is your problem, is the very first time that has happened. Otherwise, it's only me for myself. And that's how people will start to, once they've gotten over this fear, that's how they will collaborate with each other. That's how agility will build in. I don't think people will any longer, if we are using a concept where somebody is coming into work for 2 days and somebody else is coming into the same workplace for 2 days, I don't think the first guy is going to leave the place filthy for the second guy any longer, because he's going to have to come back to pay the price for it.
And so shared desks has already been a common practice. For example, when I used to work at Norman Foster, and I'm talking about 2004, we sat down whichever desk was free, and you kind of went with it. It wasn't that you had these dedicated desks necessarily where you had to, personalize your space completely. So I absolutely agree. But I have a question, Sonali. Sorry, I shouldn't be asking you a question, but I do have a question. You are one person who I know that runs a large office,
Yeah.
And how would that work when you start breaking up an office of 100, 200 people and start creating these hotspots all over the place. For someone like you who oversees all these, for you and Manit who oversee all these projects, that means you have to still oversee every project being executed in your office. How would that work over time? Or even for someone like Sonali Bhagwati, how would that work?
So I think this time has also given me time for introspection. I don't think I oversee everything, because now that I can't, I learned that lesson first when we first expanded and did a Bangalore office and then did a Mumbai office. How is it possible? I don't see everything. What you then you take when you become a certain size. I think not just for architecture, for most people, the job becomes of maintaining the vision, and it becomes of getting like-minded people to think together. The world, it cannot be made out of one person's vision. So therefore, one person cannot oversee everything. Architecture by its very nature is a collaborative profession. And I would be, I've always believed that younger minds are sharper and older minds may not be that sharp, but they have the experience. And more this time period has showed me that all I need to do really is draw upon my experience. Obviously, I'm not agile with as technology as the 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds are. So in some ways, their adaptation has been better. And I will say today that earlier I would have probably said when a new client would come in and in order to please a new client, get a new contract, they'd say, "Ha, madam, aap dekhoge na sab kuch?" And I'd say, "Of course, main sab kuch dekhti hu." I assure you that the one thing I have learned is main sab kuch nahi dekhti. And things happen. People have brains, people have minds, they are my colleagues, they have same education. How is it that I need to see everything? I don't, and I don't see everything. It's the as the mentor of these 180 architects who work at Morphogenesis, my job is to ensure a vision, a quality standardization, a growth and learning path for everyone, which is loosely going towards the same orientation for which my client has chosen me over some other firm. Okay, because they like the vision and orientation of the firm. They are not. I could be a foolish person who would think that one person guides everything. I don't think I do.
I think to some extent you're absolutely right, because it's not possible to oversee everything. And I've also learned that very often working like this online has made your work very efficient, because you're not wasting time. Neither is your client wasting time, neither are you waiting for someone to come. There is really no waste of time. You're working at an optimum kind of a usage of time. And you are not overseeing everything. You are looking at things where you should be looking at. It's, you have to work out your pyramid, and whatever issues that are not going to be taken care of by someone else will come to you, and that's the only thing you look at.
Thank you so much. I think with that, we have also addressed efficiently our next topic, which was working from home, effective or inept. I believe this conversation kind of literally clarified that. So moving on.
What is happening is that, see, work from home is there because I think it's going to remain there for a while. Because, somebody who's staying in Faridabad is not going to be able to come unless they have their own car and whatnot. So there is going to be this whole logistics issue. So I think work from home is going to continue for a while. However, human being is a social animal, and we need to come to an office to connect with each other, and that connection, that need for that is going to grow a little bit as we go on. Right now we are looking at 1 month. We may look at 2 months. Eventually that need is going to come. So I think developing these decentralized, smaller, leaner places may be one of the solutions to even facilitating a work, not from maybe home, but work from your neighborhood.
Yeah. Yes, that sounds really interesting. We could always have things like variable timing, comfort zones and things like that kicking in. So yes, of course, we'll have to look at logistic issues also across these urban areas because, when I look at my situation, I live in Mumbai. So if I have to go to work every day, it's a 4-hour period of time that I would be spending on an average getting from one place to another. So 4 hours I'm on the streets, and that's not the kind of time that I'd rather waste, driving around or something. So maybe the government needs to, wake up and take notice that better public transportation is the need of the day if we have to really know how to manage our space, manage our time, manage our families, everything put together. So moving on to the next point of discussion of pandemonium, when we restart, we're looking at the lockdown, but eventually we're going to be restarting or rebooting as we look at it. It's going to be like, switching the system back on again. What do you feel are going to be the adverse effects that would impact the short-term, mid-term, or long-term strategies of architectural and design firms in particular?
When the economy is down, we are down. That is the bottom line, unfortunately. Until people spend money and people sort of go on a roll, our work always remains depressed. So I think this is going to be a time to really tighten up our work processes, put our systems in place, work protocols in place, and do a lot of these introspection, because we know that business is going to be extremely tight. And the only way to survive this is like, you got to get tough when the times get tough, So you have to find out ways and means of surviving and getting around this, where you can still work, you can function, you can do whatever is possible to do, and still survive.
I mean, I also think, everyone talks about working efficiently, but there's also an effectiveness. You can be efficient, but how effective is your efficiency? And I've realized I run a much smaller practice than all of you. And I've realized that it's become, I mean, frankly, I have quite enjoyed this time of working from home. I haven't enjoyed the lockdown per se, but I've really, it's helped me put a lot of things into perspective, as a lot of you have said, it's helped you guys as well. But from a design, because I mean, I trained as an architect and a carpenter. And when I talk about from a production aspect of things, I have always talked about that it's more important to use things which are handmade, especially when things are functioning in cities like Delhi, where everything doesn't have to be machine made. And I'm actually grateful to a lot of architects and designers who have actually supported this effort of products that are made that are made by hand. And I actually think that over time, goods from India are going to become more popular than always running after importing stuff in. I mean, on any account, our duties have gone up. And I think on an economic level, I think none of us know how much, I mean, they say China is going to take a big hit, but I actually think we have the brains in the design fraternity. We have the creativity to actually design amazing and create amazing stuff. And we definitely have the the people who can do it. And I think we need to go back to our roots. For a long time we kept chasing the West, and I think it's about time that you actually do start looking inwards and see what we can get out of our own country. Because like you're saying, Sonali, none of us know what the future holds in terms of work coming our way. People have to get comfortable spending, and then they'll think about approaching us. Their immediate needs are going to be other things versus building a new house, building a new office.
I think I quite agree with you on that one, Koelika. We didn't really need a COVID-19 to wake us up to our manufacturing possibilities and potential, to our engineering capabilities. We should have actually realized that a long time ahead. We didn't need this COVID-19 and people banning Chinese and China and, Chinese products and China and, boycotting and all of those discussions to suddenly wake us up to the opportunities that we actually hold, but we simply, bypass it. It's almost like a secondary glance for us that, maybe this is high time. It's a wake up call that, they become a primary glance and, a primary work mode for us, because the economy can definitely benefit from it. India is extremely capable of catering to all of these aspects, as you spoke about, not just as an architect or designer, but somebody who's also into products. We are very, very capable of taking on these challenges. On that note, I would love to understand that, when you're looking at, when you're, of course, you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, considering the pandemic and everything. But what are the factors that you could predict, if you had to, that you feel could pose to be a challenge in terms of, manipulating maybe variable timelines, variable work spots, business development factors, the economy taking a hit. So overall, everything is like a cycle. It's like a chain. So if the developer doesn't have money, he can't do another project. If he can't do another project, he doesn't engage an architect. If the architect doesn't have business, so it's like a chain. Okay, and this was a cycle which was effectively running, suddenly comes to a standstill, and now we have to restart that cycle. So what do you think are the factors which are going to make a difference?
So I think this is, we are in the early stages of this romance with ourselves and our time. I think as the time progresses, we are going to see the true impact of this lockdown. I mean, I don't believe architecture is an individualist profession. We've all read Ayn Rand and we all know about Howard Roark, but I don't believe it's an individualist profession at all. I believe it's an extremely collaborative profession. I mean, I don't think a single architect knows how many people are involved in building the building that they think is their conception. And I don't think any one of us can calculate how many lives a single product we design touches. So I think we are going to feel that pain soon enough. Right now, it's okay for those of us who have large projects. It takes 3 months to finish one stage of drawing up. So it's okay. We'll keep on drawing up for 3 months and then we'll raise a bill and that's it. Okay. What happens to the next stage? Okay. And like you said, our clients are going to run out of money, or they're going to have a sense of insecurity, even if they don't run out of money. And so we are not feeling the pain right now. This is the romance stage. Okay.
No, they're feeling the pain.
It's yet to come. I think what is even worse off, I think, is that people who are at the start of their career, okay, they need to be out there. You mentioned the word, Ranjita, business development. They need to be seen. They need to showcase what they do. Okay, I don't know if how it is going to pan out for those. Okay, because yes, for the few who might need the services, so some they'll go for who they've heard of, but the new ones who have to keep taking, who have to keep coming into the community, this is going to be a very hard time for them. Very, very hard time, because if you can't be seen, if you can't be visible, then that's a problem. I think what's also going to happen is that, like Koilika touched upon, we'll have to go much more local, not only just the products we use, but also the clients we service. Because all this traveling, moving about, all this is going to, for a while, it may even be right to do that long term, but for a while, short to mid term, it's going to all stop. Okay, so we're going to have trust in our community and then be physically building for our community only. And I think this whole globalization idea is going to go seriously virtual for a while. And I have, in addition to this, I have one serious personal problem that I need to have discourse with thinking people. I need to learn from other people. That usually happens over glasses of wine and kebabs. Okay, and I have tried.
I agree. I'm with you on that one.
Wine dates on Zoom, and I've already got bored of it. So that is my immediate term problem as well. Of course,
creativity has stalled, Sonali, is it?
Sonali, we seriously recommend you don't try pouring a glass of wine onto your laptop.
I have been having Zoom dates with other architect friends with wine, but honestly, I just think our profession is so collaborative that it's also a meeting of the minds. At one level, there's the actuality of like our day-to-day job, but how does that job happen? Where do these ideas come from?
Right.
I mean, and they come from talking, engaging, seeing. I mean, why do we all go to shows? Why do we go to events like an amazing one that Koilika had arranged a while back at Taj? So why do we go there, right? I mean, we all learn, see, share, and I know there'll be new ways of sharing. I mean, we're all reading, we're doing webinars like this one, but I'm really uncomfortable about this change that's going to happen in my life. I'm really uncomfortable about it.
you know, Sonali, I think people, I'm like your contemporary, a little older than you. So for us, this is completely change,
Yeah.
a change of way of working. And yes, it is something that we are grappling with, trying to be comfortable. But yes, I mean, that feel and that connect with people across the table is a different story altogether. However, maybe as time goes by, this may become more a norm, and you know, this one may sort of fall into it a little bit more comfortably.
Yeah, but Sonali, for me, when in many interviews, when somebody asks me that, why did you, when did you decide to be an architect? I decided to be an architect when I stepped onto a site at the age of 3 with my father for the first time in my life. That day I knew. I still get the same thrill. So, like you said, it's an age thing, but I cannot imagine a life without sites. I mean, for me, construction hat is still exciting in my 50s.
No, what I'm saying is that maybe right now it's a very different scenario. Let's say 2 months from now, uh, things are not going to change. Where, I mean, things may open up, sites may open up, but your way of working is
Yeah.
not going to change drastically because of various reasons. You also want to
Well, we are in a physical, we are in a physical building profession, right? So
Yeah.
in the end of it,
So
in
that
the end of
will
it, there
have
will be
to
a
happen.
physical product.
That has to happen irrespective, you know, and that amount of interface will happen, of course, with a lot more sort of precautions. However, this is from a, you know, general way of working, I'm saying. And I think we will, as people of our age group, will have to get used to ways of working virtually, you know, a lot more than what we used to do. I think that is going to be something that will stay. It's not going to go away, even when things open up a little bit.
If I can take it on from where both the Sonalis have added on now, is that, Ranjita, like you mentioned, what are the challenges? Of course, the challenges most crucial are going to be, like you said, economy is at its slowest, you know, and if there's a recession, there's an uncertainty. You don't know the client's mindset, you know, much as you may have large projects, you don't know whether they are going to rethink about the projects. What is the relevance of that project's going to be post-pandemic, whether at a particular stage, wherever they are, whether they are going to continue with those and to what level, or will they be scaled down? We have no idea. But fortunately enough, in our practice, apart from having those large sized government projects, we also have reached a stage where we are doing our own development, our own projects, you know, which give us much thrill and pleasure, and our cumulative 4 decades of architecture practice is what we are putting to use. And like Kohelika mentioned, that, you know, being, dealing with craft people and promoting handcrafted products, where instead of getting those craftsmen to us, we have actually gone out to them, to the hills of Himachal, and that is where we are developing our own project. So in today's times, much as we see the future very challenging, we know that we have that bit of work that we are doing, our own development there, you know, where we are dealing with the villagers, with the labor from that village whom we have engaged to be building those homes for us, and we are using their local techniques, local construction, local technology. That gives us really, you know, loads of satisfaction. And I just can't wait for this pandemic to kind of the lockdown to open up so that we can rush there and just be with them and be in that healthy, safe, clean environment, you know, and we can be doing our work. So we do have that aspect of our practice currently, which I feel blessed, you know, and that we enjoy, and we can be doing that.
You know, I'm going to actually add to that, ladies. Basically, what Sabina's doing is she's harboring a little secret. You know, she's developed this amazing 60-acre development in Kasoli. Okay, with about
60 bigas, darling, 60 bigas, not
60.
acres.
Okay,
I
60
would be
bigas.
60
Ah,
acres of land there.
okay, and
But you know,
it's
Ranjita,
it's a hill, and she's developed these villas, and she was talking about healthy living. So I told her, I said, you've been hiding, you've been hiding. Why have you been hiding this? She said, so, we just decided to do this as a passion for our own craft. It's like about giving something back to the community, giving something back in terms of healthy living after a certain age, when you just want to detach and you want to go breathe healthy. And then I looked outside and I saw, okay, COVID-19, 45 days lockdown, and the air is clean. And I'm like, wow, guess what? Kudos to COVID-19. It took a COVID-19 to tell us, guess what? You can have clean air to breathe. It need not be a luxury. All it takes is a tiny little virus making its way.
NGT couldn't do, whatever odd and even couldn't do, COVID has done.
It could do all of it, you know. I know.
But I think there are immense positivities and possibilities and great ideas that are coming out of this COVID-19, and we can just sit back and think of all those positivities.
Yeah.
Possible ideas that we can engage in. You know?
I think as designers, as creative thinking people, we need to really see how this adversity can be turned into an advantage, and what we can take away, which will be there for us, for our betterment, for the practice,
Has to be a
for the building industry in every way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I understand Kohelika has a few points, but before we move on, I'd just like to inform our audience that we just have a couple of points that we'd like to discuss before taking this long list of questions that I can see on my own. You know, I can see about 20 odd questions there, and they're like some crazy ones. Okay. But before we choose and select which questions to address, we would, I'm going to touch on a very sensitive, but a very funny topic at the expense of the wallets of the architects who are on this platform with me. So we have this thing, you know, theoretically architects are supposed to be the rare group who would still get a paycheck in spite of a national pandemic like this occurring. You know, that's a belief of a lot of people. They're like, "Arey, bade architects hai, unko kya problem hai? Unke to projects chal rahe, har 2 mahine mein check aata hoga, no stress and all." I'm like, हाँ, but आगे का क्या? मतलब अभी तो फिर भी आ गया, but अभी जो impact होगा, फिर 6 महीने बाद तो check आना बंद हो जाएगा ना, फिर तब क्या होगा? You know, it's like that. But they're like, अरे no, madam, you don't know, it works differently. So, you know, I have had my own share of difficulty trying to tell these people that it doesn't work differently. It works similarly across all businesses. This is how it's going to hit us. So there are people who have asked me questions like, you know, oh, there is widespread technology. There are challenges in the long-term model, and they will be the first people to figure it out. What about us? What do you think are going to be your challenges in the long-term model? Like Sonali said, it's of course the economy hitting us hard. Do you think, other than the economy, people management is going to be a challenge?
No, firstly, the biggest I see the biggest problem. You see, it's a pyramid, right? Our patron sits on top, right? Then there's the group of architects, designers who work together to get the project done, and so on. There's supervisors, like Sonali Rastogi said. There are multiple people involved in getting a structure up and running until someone can move it and make it usable. For me, the biggest problem I see is we can only do that much work on a drawing board. And again, like, you know, we've been all of us have been talking about the fact that we need to interact with other creative people to keep moving forward. But unless we take care of the problem of the people who actually do the work at the ground level, which is actually the largest number of people involved, which for us in a city like Delhi becomes, or in any metropolitan city, becomes migrant laborers. Now, for those who have gone back and under the conditions that they have gone back, I mean, we've all seen the news, lakhs and lakhs of people literally, you know, stuck in not being able to reach home. Eventually, some made it, some didn't make it, some got stranded, some who made it back were made to sit outside their villages with very little provisions given to them for the 14 days of quarantine that before they could enter their little towns and stuff. So for someone, and I'm sure we're all going to face this problem, because until that majority of people come back and start fueling this machine of architecture and design and construction, we are not really going to be able to move forward. At least that's how I look at it. Because as we all know, design is while we can do almost everything on a drawing board, unless we engage with our site, sometimes things change. You know, sometimes we want things to change. Sometimes we see there is a problem. And until we get that one-on-one back on our sites, we are going to run into a problem to be able to receive that paycheck that there is this, at least for me, I think it is, the paychecks will not come in. We are going to suffer as much.
Not going to come in irrespective.
Yeah.
Because
For
first
everyone.
of all, there is nobody to do the building. Getting the whole labor back and to get the building industry started is going to be one story,
And an enormous job. It's going
an
to be
enormous job.
Yeah.
And,
Also, all industries are feeling the pain so much. So even before the pain, actually, for some of the larger clients, even before the pain becomes a reality, but in anticipation of the pain,
nobody's spending.
you have blanket
Yeah.
stoppage of all bills.
Projects have stopped. Whatever had to go on, there is nobody to take it forward right now. Once the lockdown opens, we'll see what things are, who's going to come and do what. It's something that we have to, wait and watch. And nobody, obviously, if they're not building, projects are not going ahead, nobody's going to pay you for it, So it's going to be a really tough road ahead, and paychecks are not coming in. I mean, that's a given.
True,
Across
definitely.
I'm saying this is across the community.
Yeah.
However big or small
And
you are.
I also, in addition to this, for all the architect friends who are listening, I see a lot of rework coming in, because one of the things that is going to happen from a lot of work from home and a lot of assurances we are giving our clients that we are working, which we are. But if this continues for long, there will be a lot of testing of new ground that can you make my project more sellable by making it more safe? Can you rework this? Can you rework that? So and a lot of that is
Projects are changing, Sonali.
all
It's
projects
not
are
just
changing.
the whole scales are changing, because
Yeah,
people are, what we are talking today, people are evaluating the same concepts in all their businesses.
Yeah.
So there is quantum shift in the requirements coming in.
Yeah, so there will be rework without payment, and that's it's a lot of pain. And whilst at one level one is talking of that established practices, architects get their checks, but at the end of the day, much like any other profession, whether it's a starting doctor, starting architect, starting lawyer, the youngsters, it's not that they have this lavish kind of paycheck and huge savings. They are younger architects who form the large workforce. And I mean,
my hand for that one.
where I mean, an architect starts after 5 years of education, starts their first job at 25 to 30,000 rupees a month.
Oh, sometimes not even that.
So sometimes not even that.
Not
so
even that.
where is the buffer to support this? So if the so-called check, which is not coming, even if it is coming, how does that support? It's not that architects have this huge creamy layer which comes in all the time, which one can, it's a service profession. It's not.
Architects don't have those reserves. Let's put it
Don't
that
have
way.
the- I mean,
Support paying a office for 2 months, 3 months without receiving the checks.
I don't even think I don't think from my conversations with my SPA alumni, I don't think people have even 2 months reserve.
Exactly. People are literally working month to month.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So on that note, we can safely say that the theory that architects are very comfortable because they have regular paychecks coming in is absolutely incorrect.
Absolutely.
You see, everybody has to slog for their money.
Can I tell you a secret? Why, Ranjita? Because most architects love a great lifestyle. They love their books, they love their art, they love their wine, they love their kebabs. So they look like there is a lot happening.
No, but the books, I believe, are a very, very worthy investment. Whatever little that I have had the opportunity to go through, I think they really give you a very different perspective than what we learn. I would apologize. Of course, my education is into business management. Okay, and I apologize for that. It talks about
you're in the right profession, because at least you know how to manage things. We are architects. We only think.
But eventually, I mean, considering the fact that even I'm in the profession of events and conferences and exhibitions, where I stand and look at it. In fact, a colleague of mine yesterday had a conversation with me that how do you look at the transition? This lockdown, we've suddenly started exploiting technology. What happens when the season for the exhibition, where spaces have already been booked, payments have already been done, banquet spaces have been paid for in 5 stars, invitations have already been sorted, creatives have been paid for, and you have supposed to have a conference, then you have supposed to have an exhibition. How are people going to react to it? Because again, the social distancing. Even for next year, so I was telling them, I said that probably you will have to look at the operational angle of it, and not, because if your operational angles are sound and keeping in line with basic common sense of how you should be behaving after being taught a lesson like COVID-19. It took a Chinese lesson for us to wake up to our Indian common sense and practicalities. I said that I don't see how it should be, a very big problem. It can be overcome. On that note, I believe that we have very beautifully and sufficiently addressed our concerns on the pandemic, on the pandemonium, which is the result of this pandemic. In fact, I love the way that Sonali Rastogi actually framed that one, because I believe that's quite true. We've been looking at the pandemonium as the result of the pandemic. I think we need to realize that we as human beings on this earth are the pandemonium that caused this pandemic. That's actually a more logical way of putting it. So we've got questions here that where we've got questions about clients or patrons who are asked to foresee as to who are the seats of power that are going to respond to after the pandemic in terms of reducing the ill thought of larger indoor spaces in residences and gift courtyards. Okay, Mr. Amrit Panbar, I can read that question of yours, but you have to please understand that seats of power that's going to respond to after pandemic terms of reducing the ill thought of larger indoor spaces in residences and courtyards or landscaping and everything. Okay, everything has to come together in the sensibility of the patron, the service delivery, in this case, the architect and the planner, and the patron's sensibility of how your space should be utilized. A lot of times we see, I'm not an architect, I've worked closely with the fraternity, and one very common problem that I have seen in this fraternity is that clients hire the best of the architects because they say that, oh, I have the money, I can afford the best, she's the best or he's the best in her, in their field, so I have the expert. Then they choose to tell the expert of what to do. I think that's the worst mistake that you can do. You do not hire an expert to tell the expert what the expert should do. Please have faith. So when you're looking at your own space, whether you deserve a courtyard, you deserve a balcony, let the architect come back to you and tell you that. It is not about a seat of power. It is a seat of common sense, education, experience that kicks in together from the expert who you have hired to do the job. Okay.
Well,
So,
I wish everyone thought like that.
I know.
And
We need to
the
record
clients
that
and trusted
that
and
go
depended
viral.
on their architects. Unfortunately, so we all know.
Sonali, be careful. Okay, take time. Please
I'm
make
telling
it
you,
work.
I've recorded it for Ranjita and I'm going to make that go viral.
Yeah, but I'm saying, be careful of what you say. We still need work after this.
No, we do.
All I'm saying is that it's not that I'm telling the patron that you don't know what you're doing, okay? But then when you give a brief, there has to be a certain semblance of clarity on it, and then you have to place that faith in that expert.
Ranjita, you don't have to explain this concept to us.
Yeah,
we all know it only too well.
Yeah, exactly. I
You know,
thought
Ranjita, but the only thing that a client brief is almost, I wouldn't say maybe 100%, but at least 90% governed by economic factors and financial factors. And that's the bottom line.
the fun is going to start when it starts get governing by COVID-19. So we add one more factor to it. So the Chinese factor is what we probably add to it now. Okay, so we've seen the incarnation of nature during lockdown time. We have to live with social distancing for another few months, years. Going to affect, how is this going to affect the design of buildings in the coming times? Or you think this is the true way that you had to design the buildings will be the only new way to think about designs of buildings and urban forms in particular? Okay, we have a gentleman called Mr. Kapil Mehta who's addressing this question. I believe it's not about incarnation of nature during lockdown. It's like something that we've been talking about, that why did we need the lockdown to make us realize this? Isn't this something that should be self-realized or a self-conscious factor, something that you need to practice first at individual level and then, out into the world? When we are not willing to do it at an individual level, we do not have the right to point the finger and say, this is how it should have been done. So that's how we look at it. So it's not just about nature, it's also about us. Let's not use.
But I mean, based off that question, this is a question that I have very difficulty even comprehending, because I keep thinking we know that burning crop is a problem, right? And all this polluted air comes towards Delhi. And for that, we are allowing investments, we are allowing technology to come in from abroad to give us clean air. Why don't we try and find a solution at the root of the problem? I think this is what he's even trying to get at. And this is something that I've been saying from the start. We never try to attack the problem at its root. We're only trying to find a solution, cleaning the Ganges, cleaning the air, all of this. I mean, the sparrow, when was the last time any of you saw a sparrow in Delhi, by the way?
As a child.
What?
As a child.
Yeah, exactly. So we have managed to make this bird completely disappear. And how many of us actually realize that? So, I don't know. I actually hope that we are going to see change. We are going to bring about change. I mean, we can do it at our own small level, within our businesses, in our personal lives. But what happens at a bigger level, going back to that question that how can you secure your home? But for me, home is not just about living, because I live actually in a tiny house. It's not just about being home. Home is my environment. It's the city I live in. That is what I call home. And I'm sure almost everybody on this panel feels the same way.
This is where the social responsibility also kicks in, because when you look at these smaller colonies, you look at these colonies which are not authorized, you will find there's no proper sewage system. There is all sorts of rubbish happening. Now there are so many low cost, low energy solutions which have been developed by people over here. And
by vernacular architects, actually.
Sorry?
A lot of it's been done even by vernacular architects.
And some really good stuff has been done by small companies, small agencies, NGOs, or whatever. I think it's a question of getting them all activated, bringing them to the forefront, and trying to see how you can integrate these simple solutions and solve bigger problems, And instead of getting these very fancy, high energy and high solutions from all over the world, we do have, what I would say, not for everything, but at least for 60, 70 of our major problems, we will find solutions in-house, simple solutions that will help us solve a whole lot of problems. And if we can do that much, we have gone a long way.
But Sonali, I think a lot of these problems are created at an earlier stage, which is policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So Koelika talked about the crop burning, but that came out of a series of ill-founded policies, where it's related to what they do with
even the colonies have come as a thing of
policy. So they wrong water policies. Therefore, the farmer moves to different kind of crop rotation. Then a lot of American money to make corn for chicken, and then therefore there are different kind of crop cycles, no time between crop cycles, therefore you have to burn it rather than cut it. So it's all policy and economics driven at the end of the day. I don't think people set out to say, okay, now I'm going to be an abusive person to the environment.
I know the policies are there, but now if you look at the problems as they are today, there are still simple solutions to solve them. Yes, it's a two-pronged thing. One is at the policy level, but the other one is the ground. So that is solvable. That's my point.
Yeah. So even in the notes that Ranjita sent us, there was a point of discussion called bottleneck, where she's written what are the factors you're concerned about with the future way forward that you feel would pose to be a challenge post the pandemic. I still think it will be a policy only, because we live mostly in policy paralysis. Okay, now we have a master plan 2021 that nobody's talking about changing it. Nobody's talking about immediately starting a decentralization vision. So because
that's because there is no partnership.
There's no partnership. There's no partnership. There is so-called think tanks and this and that created.
Those think tanks think at a different level.
Which is never executed.
Things. They don't think the way we think.
Exactly. So there is no partnership between, for the lack of a better word, let me say civil society of architecture and nation building. There is no partnership between that and the policymaker. Policymaker is doing it based on economics and taxes.
Also, there is no partnership at policy level, and there is no or very little partnership even at the ground level. That is why a lot of these very simple solutions are not coming to the foreground.
That is what I said, that this is where as architects now we need to make ourselves heard and make ourselves relevant, you know, given today's scenario. And also what you're talking and what all of us are discussing, that the problems, there are learnings, are simple solutions, much as Sonali says. I just hope that these learnings continue post-pandemic. And once our situation comes back to pretty much normal, which might be a new normal, I just hope we just don't forget all of these with time and be back to our what we've been doing all these years and be forgotten with what all we are talking and all the learning.
Community, in order to make sure that this happens, we as a community needs to keep talking, keep communicating with each other, to also remind each other. I mean, maybe 1 year down the line, 1.5 years down the line, when things are more close to normal, in order to not forget and sort of settle back into something, we have to keep talking to each other so that we learn from each other.
Absolutely what you're saying. But the point what Kohelika raised about crop burning is not today's problem. It's been there since years and it happens every year that we see this. But unfortunately, we haven't been talking about it. You know,
we
we
don't
just
do anything about it.
look at all our problems today because we've got one of, you know, those topics to talk about, and hence we're bringing out all our problems, you know. So that is why I'm kind of very worried that would this talk and everything also be a talk of the past very soon once we are back to our normal life? You know, like you're saying, like Sonali, you say we do need to keep on talking. But have we been talking about our other problems that we face day in and day out?
Okay. No, I think not only do we talk, and I think whatever one may have done in order to sort of veer on this path, it's good to share that. So that it helps others, that it inspires others, you learn from others, that, okay, they could do this, maybe we can do that, you know. I think we need to hold each other's hands and see how we can all just go forward on this.
Absolutely
right. But I do agree with Sonali Rastogi because, you know, policy is critical. Even to survive this pandemic, for people who run small businesses, we need the government to, I mean, I work with a lot of people who are smaller contractors who won't survive this, unless there are certain policies in place for them to be able to survive this. So while I can hold their hand and I can help them, I also have my limitations. We all do. You know, we're not going to take the shirt off our back in order to ensure that someone else is clothed. I mean, there is a limit to how far we can hold somebody's hand and how far we can help somebody.
But you know, unless we talk and unless we
I agree.
Unless we make ourselves heard on this policy level, somehow if we can escalate this to that level, only then there may be some chance of being heard on this.
That's exactly the point that I was getting at, you know, that we have to make sure that all of this talk that we are doing and the ideas that are pouring forward and the new perspectives that we are doing need to come together collectively to be put forward to, you know, at the policy levels. And we have to ensure that all of these can be implemented.
I think I have an idea on that one. I think that's a very valid point from all of you, where all these discussions need to be organized and put forward in such a manner that the relevant stakeholders sit up and take notice. I seriously have come up with an idea on that one, but then we are going to discuss that privately and we can see how we can document the whole thing.
Look forward to hearing that.
Absolutely, Sonali. It will be my pleasure. On that note, I would like to tell Mr. Rao that I hope we have addressed your question in this conversation for simple steps for a major adaptive reuse of our buildings in the next few years, and then relook at bylaws. So when we talk about bylaws, yes, we just don't talk about laws, we talk about policies, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about change comprehensively and overall. It's like a zero net policy kind of a thing. You know, we have to figure out one of those things for how we move forward on this line. We have Mr. Neeraj Gupta asking about the current situation, whether it will have any impact in changing the architecture shape and its parameters of architecture will help to overcome this kind of situation. Mr. Gupta, I will address that for you personally. It is not about the current situation, COVID-19 making an impact on architecture. We need to understand that architecture was always very sound when it was in the hands of the right stakeholders. It is the patrons of that profession who needs to sit up and take notice of that current situation and allow architecture to make the difference. Okay.
Wow, brilliantly said.
Thank you. You know, that's how I personally believe. You know, we need to change our perceptions at our individual levels. You know, I think that's very important somewhere. So I hope, Mr. Gupta, that answers your question. We'll go on to a question raised by Mr. Aman Kotak, who happens to be the business head for Okio Lighting from GM. He asked that what, in the opinion of all of you as custodians of the interior design and architecture industry, it would be the impact on luxury brands in India post COVID-19 phase. I am going to start with an answer to that, Aman, before the rest of them move forward. God knows. Okay. COVID knows, God knows. Okay.
No,
And
you know, I think till the economy starts rolling and we bounce back, which may take, I don't know, maybe a year. I think anything which is money oriented. I mean, we talked of architecture, we talked of buildings where people could stop. Obviously, luxury goods are another, very close
Yes.
second in the line. And unless the money starts flowing back in, luxury goods are going to take a hit.
But you know, I'd like to add a twist to that. I have a very different definition to luxury. We might talk about, Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, all that. But for me, luxury is very different. So again, it depends on what Mr. Kotak is really talking about. Because for me, luxury is what gives me happiness. That is luxury. And I think people need to start realizing that, and like Sonali said, we can do,
goods.
Yeah, we can, even with material goods, what is that good which is a luxury? Does it have to be branded? I mean, I get told by my family all the time, because if I like something, say it's a perfume, right? I will obsess about it, and I won't change it. I don't feel the need to necessarily constantly change or constantly rediscover something else that I want to use. So I think, Sonali said that, she made a point that I've also realized you can do with a lot less, actually, and it gives you a lot more happiness doing with that less. Like, I have realized that I actually don't like staff. I've gone back to the way I used to live for 8 years in New York, where, it's my dogs, my kids, and me, and there's very little staff around. So what really is luxury, as far as luxury brands, I think, they're going to have to take a back seat for a while. I don't think it's 12 months. I think, but
Yeah.
again,
But another thing I'd like to bring to notice is that this is the time, because I think we are going to be moving away for a while from globalization. As I said earlier, globalization will be a virtual concept. And I think in that sense, this is a time for resurgence of Indian luxury.
Yeah.
So handcrafted products, as you've been talking about, reinvention of lost traditions, more, maybe, I mean, once the initial hurt is out, and once people are spending anything, I think it may be the chance to acquire Indian luxury, and which will probably come at more affordable prices. There was a time, I mean, there's been many a times where Indian luxury goods are way more expensive than imported luxury goods. But I think it will be the time of the Indian market, Indian luxury will come up before global does.
And if I may just add to that, is that these times of the pandemic and the lockdown that we have been in, actually luxury has gotten a very different meaning to it, Lots of things which we feel were, which from necessities had been, from luxuries had become necessities. And now we're just feeling back that they were, that we don't need those luxuries anymore, and we can just be doing without them. And for all of us who are living in the cosmopolitans, for me, and again, I'll say, taking cue back from my project, for me today, fresh air and living green is luxury, in our places.
That has always been a luxury for Delhiites.
Yeah, and that's exactly a luxury. So that amongst material goods, that is luxury,
So, however, material goods, branded goods are going to take a backseat. And that is going to be, what we term as luxury goods in a normal parlance is going to be something which is not going to move in a great hurry.
I think we should reinvent, but I think this is an opportunity for the creative world to reinvent what is luxury.
Yes, of course.
Really. I mean, we've got so many creative people in this country, and we just need to have the confidence.
You know, I think luxury is also a word which is not the right word. You know,
Misused.
it's misused. So I think it's whatever works. You know, whatever you can create, which is a good design, which works functionally, which serves the purpose, which serves the community. It's everything.
Very relative term, you know, because it has different connotations for different people.
Yeah.
I hope, Mr. Kotak, we've adequately managed to answer your question. We have a next question by Shivani Saxena. She asks us that the pandemic could restrict access and lead to fortifying public transit and re-emergence of private transport. When things come back to normal, how do we address the alternatives in public transit? Ms. Saxena, I'd love to tell you the answer to this. It's just two factors. One, jugaad. Second, common sense. Because eventually you really don't know how things are going to open up. So we will resort back to our strongest Indian strength, jugaad. And the second, common sense from whatever that we've learned in this lockdown period.
Some years ago, once when I went to a metro station, I saw that there was a queue which had formed to get onto the platform, to the concourse. And I realized because the metro people were trying to make sure that there are a certain number of people didn't get on because of the safety factor in terms of somebody may push somebody or whatever. I think maybe a more elaborate version of that may be one of the ways that they will start, because people need to commute, people need to go from A to B, and not everyone has a car. So I think they will evolve a way of reasonably safe public transport. But again, it's something which it's a conjecture. We don't know how it's going to evolve and how it's going to happen.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from, Sonali. I was in Delhi and I've used the metro and I've, gotten into a proper line, at Rajiv Chowk to board the metro. And then I come to Mumbai and I go to a Mumbai, the local trains, okay? And it is a pandemic which I faced before the COVID-19. Very honestly.
I know.
Peak hours, the Mumbai locals are veritable death machines. I mean, either you fall off the platform and get crushed to death under the train, or you would get inside the train, in the process get crushed to death, or when you're getting off, you get crushed to death. But eventually, it's a death machine, because
Sonali Rastogi's Pandemonium.
So yes, of course, public transport is a veritable cause for concern. And okay, we have got Shivani again asking us, how do we alleviate urban loneliness in the absence of real company? So Shivani, have you heard of Netflix? Maybe we'll try that.
I think this will go back to my strong belief that we are going to see a resurgence of community life. I think the colony clubs will feel safer, because as a community, you are keeping a certain level of hygiene. I was discussing with my daughter the other day, and she said, I think there will be no regular cinema. It will only be gold class, because everybody sits so 1 meter away from each other, right? And then I thought to myself,
there's no cinema there's not going to be any cinema for a long time.
Exactly. I said, there's going to be no cinema. What's probably going to happen, as a child, I used to go and see open air cinema in Panchsheel Club once a week. And as a community, we used to watch.
In Ahmedabad, we used to go for drive-in cinemas.
Yeah.
You sat in your own car.
Yeah. So I think there will be new ways of alleviating social loneliness. I was saying it in jest when I was saying the wine and kebabs, but honestly, I think we are human beings, right? Why have all these social places emerged? Why have malls and cinemas and other entertainment? Because we like doing that. I mean, on the other day, I was shocked that I first time watched a concert, which I'm sure a lot of you did, the Andrea Bocelli one, and there was 4.5 million people waiting because he was late for a few minutes. And then it hit 27 million in the first 48 hours. Okay. Then I thought, oh, wow, he must be the most successful musician in the world. He sang in an empty cathedral and he had 27 million. So then I just Googled. Okay. And apparently for the last 4 or 5 years, or not my generation clearly, but when I looked at the names of the movies, but they're actually within the first 24 hours of release, movies hit more than 200 million viewership. 200 million. I don't even know like what that number is, right? It's so massive. So whilst there was a method of socializing that I did, all my friends were going, okay, let's watch. Okay, he's late. Whatever, we were all WhatsApping. Oh, why is he taking so long? What wine are you drinking? What wine am I drinking? And then I thought that was a miracle. And then when I looked at the numbers, I was like just completely blown over. So I do think there will be other forms of entertainment which will become community entertainment online. And then there will be back the resurgence of clubs and colony clubs, and maybe
I think there's already a resurgence of colony clubs even before this, because of the fact that, you know, when you came back from work or whatever, you just didn't want to go somewhere else. So that itself, the way our life has been in Delhi or Bombay or most of these cities, it is something where you want to socialize, you want to be within a community and not really go anywhere else. So this was already happening. It's probably just going to get more and more accelerated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing, I take my dogs out for a short walk twice a day. And I'm actually again seeing something which I saw my mother do when I was a child, which is I'm seeing people stand in the evening on their gates, unfortunately with masks, and say hi and bye to other passerbys who are dog walking. I can't remember when I ever said hi to a neighbor on a gate before.
In these colonies, it doesn't happen.
But it happens now.
Yeah.
Nali, you mean your dogs were taking you for a walk?
Exactly. So I think what is going to happen in Shivani, in my opinion, is that we will remember some of the earlier ways of smaller, have more trust in community, smaller socialization. And I think this wish to jump onto a flight to Dubai and Bangkok and go shopping at the first possible chance is going to not come up for a while. Yeah.
You know, this whole story about jumping onto a flight and going, you know, it's like a cycle. It starts with the bigger cities. You peak up and it goes down. It hits the tier 2 towns and then it peaks up and it goes down. So I think in the cities, it was already on a downtrend because of your lifestyle again. And I think this community living and community socializing will definitely take a forefront.
I think socializing at homes will pick up again because you trust homes.
Probably, yes, your safest place to be today. And also, like, you know, as part of this pandemic, we've seen how communities who have lived in residential high rises are coming together to actually connect with their neighbors and connect with each other, whether it's even on balconies and singing and clapping or just doing this. So much that is happening, you know, so they are bonding at that community level.
You're right, because I live in a condominium and we sit outside our own doors and we know we have a glass of wine because at least we can chat with each other across the lobby, you know. So a lot of these things, from one balcony to another, you're talking, you're exercising, you're, you know, all sorts of things are happening.
Yeah, there's music playing, it's all happening.
Yeah.
Great. So with that, there is a Mr. Kapoor who asked us about educational spaces create memories. Architecture forever has had that responsibility. Typology might need a lot of thought at its foundation, where architecture plays a very important role. Mr. Kapoor, like you rightly said, architecture plays a very important role. Again, we go back to the same old topic of where the patrons also need to realize it and give that architecture an opportunity. Moving on, we have Riddhi Mehra asking us, what about hospitals and their architectural changes? Riddhi, as you know, the healthcare sector in India is extremely debatable. So how hospitals come up, you know, wellness centers come up and all of that, only architects or architectural ideas will not be able to take it forward. There's a lot of factors which kick in together. And the largest percentage of those factors is the policies. So till the time, like we've discussed before, the policies are not favorable to a lot of conditions which are not exactly understood at the best of their abilities right now and not sorted out. You know, we don't really see how certain sectors like hospitals, healthcare and everything can actually have 100% positive changeover. It is going to be slow, gradual, but yes, eventually people are working at it. So maybe in the next decade or so, you would see changes which are very visible. What are the changes do we need to propose in the architectural college syllabus and architectural standards? Mr. Anonymous, Mr. and Miss Anonymous, we would love to address that question, but it's a whole entire story altogether, and it could go on for a few more hours. And I'm pretty sure that our, speakers would love to take the last few questions as quickly as possible, since we've been doing this for quite some time now. So that's going to be another discussion, and you can always log in to Design Work Videos, and we will address it. Mr. Chawla says, I think my question has not been understood completely. Idea of collaboration has been there, but the idea of competition has been one step ahead indeed. Now the collaborations will definitely be the priority, and hopefully our community will always come together despite the situations all around. Mr. Chawla, every single community wants to come forward. It's like this. It's like this is a lesson. Trust me, the speakers that I have with me today are the people who've not been just patrons of great architecture or stakeholders of great architecture. They've also been stakeholders of very positive thought leadership. So yes, while your question is in the right forum, in the right way, but you will need to look around yourself also and understand that competition in the positive note, like you've written, is always good for growth. And when you couple the competition with collaboration, you definitely are on the right path. The idea is there, but yes, everybody figures out an individual way. It cannot be one formula that works for everyone. That never works. You're individual, so there has to be individual formulas. So all the best with figuring out your formula. It is pertinent to mention, this is a question by Ritu Kapila, that certain private architects with big builders and their thought planning has changed the architectural trends and led government organization to follow these trends in some cases. It has created so much of burden on urban places. Would anyone like to take this one? Quite controversial. Okay.
So again, a lot to do with policies,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you take a project like Kidwai Nagar, the architect, fine. I mean, you may criticize or you may this thing, the architecture, that's a different story. But the volume of that entire development was determined by a policy. It was not determined by the architect.
So the environmental impact of it is also determined by a policy as to what is the environmental standard. So it is architects. I think architects would give themselves too much credit if they think they could shape the world. It starts with the visioning, and visioning starts from policy. So that is how it breaks down. Without vision and policy, there's very little that can move.
All these volumes are generated by policies more than anything else.
Thank you for
trying to do the best within a few parameters.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you so much on that. I think, Ms. Ritu, we've answered your question. Kindly do not look towards the fraternity as the scapegoats. Trust me, there are a lot of other factors, working towards it. Just because you see us on the screen here doesn't mean, we are the devils. We can be devils, but like Sonali Rastogi mentioned, with the wine glasses and the kebabs, but not always with the project. It doesn't work that way. Okay. So again, a anonymous attendee, pandemic agile working. Okay, what is the new mantra? Okay, we've already answered this question. So Mr. Anonymous Attendee, I think you should have been following our webinar right from the start there. We have Aditya Kashikar, agile working is acceptable pre-construction design management stage. Okay, Aditya, we've already answered this question. You can always see highlights of the webinar on YouTube. I'm sure you will get your answer. Okay, so we're discussing change in work style under current situation. Mr. Chetan Trivedi has asked us that we're discussing the change in work style under current situation, but considering human behavior of forgetting the past and getting back to old style, will human go back to the past style of working after a year? If not, this will be a great impact on overall development. Mr. Trivedi, you're absolutely right. And if we do go back, the best that we can guarantee will happen is a drastic drop in the population, which I think eventually will do good for us. So, however cruel that might sound, but it's a fact. Maybe we need to, sit up and take note of that. Okay, so will this pandemic now result in some new and creative architectural diversification? What kind of diversifications could happen, as this could be food for thought for the upcoming architects, and this could also be taken up in academic sector by architect Amrit Panwar, who is the visiting faculty at the University of Chandigarh. So, ladies, what would you offer to contribute on this question? It's quite interesting.
I definitely think that the design projects in the next several years to come are going to be all about, like we get first, second year, you get to design a house. It's going to be now design a safe house, design for the community, design an education in a digital world, education center. So of course, this is going to be the prevalent topic. This is going to form the background of all discussion and discourse, for sure. For sure. And probably a lot of new incredible ideas will emerge out of it. So
architects still need to get educated as architects before they can practice. So that's another problem we are going to be facing.
That's one of the comments that's come in. That's one of the comments that has come in from Akriti Kapoor, that the coming time, therefore, is going to become very, it'll dissuade people from taking architecture up as a profession.
Sometimes I honestly feel that people do not understand the potential or the reach of architecture, and they're holed up in those 4 or 5 years of academics and the pursuit of those first 10 projects. They just somewhere stop self-developing themselves. Probably.
I wouldn't, Ranjita. I wouldn't agree. I love engaging with students, and I think their minds are the most agile. And I do think that in today's day and age, where financial responsibilities are so high, education is so expensive, unless you are one of those few fortunate ones to still get into one of the older schools of architecture, run by the government. Otherwise, it's so expensive, that I think if people feel that they are graduating out of college in a recessionary environment, and architecture, as we all real estate, architecture is going to be badly hit, it's going to be a difficult time. I know when I was doing my postgraduate studies in London, the employment rate was only 50%. 50% of all architects were unemployed. I also graduated in a recession. 50% of all architects were not employed. And the ones who graduated instead became graphic designers, web designers, and every other associated profession that our core design education trains us for. And I think it's something to be deeply concerned, and I am in a way glad, but I think it's also very painful for 18 to 22-year-olds to be thinking about choosing a profession based on not passion, but based on that they will be graduating in a recession, and what will be employability. Having said that, even 2 years ago, I remember attending a seminar by a visionary thinker who is a UPenn Dean of Engineering, and he said that there was a list of new emergent professions, and he said of the professions as we know them, if we make a list of top 50, 40 will cease to exist in the next 20 years.
Okay. So like when in the good old days, an architect used to do everything, whether it was graphics or art or X, Y, Z. Today, 10 new design professions have emerged in the last 30 years, which were not there earlier. Similarly, maybe 10 more will emerge.
Yeah.
And that's how, it's a constant change that we have to keep adapting to.
I mean, who had heard of a UX UI designer? And I have an architect friend who, strangely my age, who became a UX UI designer. So there will be, I mean, I think it's great that students think about it, that where is their life going to take them? I mean, I think there's a certain amount of responsibility which today's generation has towards themselves, which is good. It saddens me when it appears like it's taking them away from a choice of passion. But I do believe that persistence takes them towards another passion at some point.
Right. We have another question from Ritu Kapila. She says that collaborative, workable and sensitive solutions without charging fee shall be passed on as social service rather than just blaming and knowing the exact background. Government is taking a lot of advice from experts, giving them a platform, which are one of the for upcoming eminent architects. Okay, Ritu, you need to understand one thing. I mean, where I understand, I am trying to identify with your thought process of architectural advice and solutions as a charitable cause or as a social service. We need to understand a very basic psychology that we practice as human beings. We do not respect what comes free. It is embedded in us that unless and until there's a commercial value, attached to it, we don't tend to take it seriously. And besides, I think it's completely unfair to the community that you expect them to do charitable work and social service in the name of the need of the nation and need of the hour. Just because whatever decisions you've made at some point has gone haywire or awry, because you did not involve the right kind of people, because for whatever megalomaniac trip that you were on. So yes, I am not sure how the architects would feel about it, but as a non-architect and watching from the sidelines, I think that wouldn't be fair to the fraternity to be expecting them to do social work or charitable work, in the name of helping the nation, and that also large-scale ones, when you're looking at government projects. What do you feel about this, Sabina?
Well, let me say that see, architecture, when we are practicing, there are many a times when we go beyond our services committed, and we do kind of overgive to the client. We really do not term it as where our stages stop and have we gotten paid for it or not, and are we still doing it. Many a times it's happened at a project where we have delivered more than we should. Why? Because we felt in the interest of the project, that this extra bit needed to be done. Also, for many a times, various institutions, you're many a times you've been reached out to by your local administration, where you are, or probably by some NGO that requires your services, and you feel for it, genuinely as a professional, and you understand that, yes, if I can, offer these, I can provide these services, then why not? And we have done that many a times, and we do it, going beyond our thing. Sometimes even just to, just for a relationship we've had with a client. We've been working with a large size client for the last 13 years, and for their particular project where they needed to pitch in, and so it was like for a new project when you have to, you pitched in, we've already done multiple jobs with them, and for another one that they wanted to. So we just went all out because of an association and a rapport that you have with a particular organization or with a client. You've developed that kind of a rapport, but it's not kind of mandated that, if we are asked to kind of provide free of cost services during these times, because these times are for all, for us as well.
So I'll just add to this. I think all architects, across the board, have always gone beyond their committed scope of work for any project. That goes without saying, because ours is a very intangible sort of service. It's not like a product that you deliver and, that's the end of it. Since it's so intangible, there is no it's a very fine line, and there's really no boundary that this is where you stop or this is where you go ahead, because as Sabina said, it's completely on relationship. However, even at a public level, I think, I can say for myself, we have always tried to support whatever little we could. One day we came across a situation where before this Commonwealth Games, they were trying to align this road near City Fort area, and they were going to cut 28 mature trees for it. And our concern came from the fact that they were going to cut 28 mature trees. So we looked at the plan and we just realigned it a little bit, in which all in all, 3 small Ashoka trees had to be relocated. And all the 28 mature trees were completely saved. So I would say that those are the kind of things that we would like to do as a part of something that you feel about, because that's an area that one uses all the time, or one used to use all the time. Similarly, they were trying to cut across the entire hockey and cricket field at City Fort to create some emergency access during the Commonwealth Games. And I said, why would you want to spoil something like this? So we again found a solution for them, which really cost them nothing and it disrupted nothing. So I think little inputs at small levels, at these kind of levels, is something that we all do all the time.
I want to add.
That's what we do.
I want to add to this by saying that I totally believe that people who made architecture as a profession of choice have this quirk which makes them not entirely transactional in nature. and perhaps that is the reason we all don't have more than 2 months of reserve financially. But I think that is, you stereotypically say this is what a singer is like, and this is what an author is like, this is what a mad scientist looks like. An architect is essentially at their core has a non-transactional component to their spirit, which is why they chose this profession. Okay, so I think all of us can tell you endless stories of how we contribute. I mean, I've worked closely with Sonali at Delhi Urban Arts Commission. I won't comment that much about the effectiveness of it, but we tried our best. We try and that's literally no payment. You get car fuel money for 6 years. Okay, you get car fuel money to give in 1 working day every week. Okay, you get so many. I have worked together with my partner and my husband on resurrecting Delhi's nalas, and finally became a NGT ruling. Okay, and if you go look it up now, also you'll find it. 8 years on a 1 rupee contract, 1 single rupee for 8 years is what it took to get that done through 28 agencies. So, and all of us will tell you many such stories, each and every one of us. So that is the beauty of being an architect also, because we deal with so much impact in life. What we do has an impact on many lives. So there's always the opportunity, and I don't think many of us shy away from that opportunity.
On that note, I think
where it comes to helping the community around you, what you feel for, I think we all have stepped in at various points in time and not really thought of a transaction or a financial implication, but just given whatever you could give.
But on that note, I think we've addressed Kapila by saying that, like you heard, the community actually does a lot of social service, a lot of charitable work. It's just that they choose not to go about advertising it. So, like you just heard them, there's a lot of work happening at their end, which they, they believe it's giving back to the community. We have Mr. Kapoor asking that a profession not being resilient enough as real estate, the first thing that gets affected would discourage a lot of new talent in taking up the profession totally. Mr. Kapoor, I think that would apply across a lot of professions in the current time. People might be feeling discouraged, but it is all about having faith in the betterment of tomorrow. So, and I personally don't believe that the profession is not resilient. I think considering the fact that architecture in India academically has not seen any major breakthrough in the last decade or two. It has not seen any major recognition in terms of the people who do some great work, change lives, actually being recognized on a national platform. So when we look at all of that and we still see those same people doing great work consistently, every day, 24/7. Walking towards giving something back to the community. I think the profession is very resilient. Keep your faith in the profession and in the tomorrow is how we put it. Mr. Ankush Malde says that what way should a small-scale architectural firm react to post-pandemic situation? Mr. Malde, actually, it's not about a small-scale architectural firm. It's about every single firm to survive in profession, to stay around architecture. It's a very unknown path that everybody will be walking in the next 3 to 6 months. It's a path that everyone individually will have to figure out and fall back on your strengths and work with patience, work with intelligence, work with faith. That's what we can say. Mr. Panwar says, do we all agree that we need to sensitize? This is architect Amrit Panwar again writing into us, asking that do we all agree that we need to sensitize the senior students in school about design because they're going to be the future policy makers? I don't know how sensitizing senior students about design would really help them to become future policy makers, because I think they will also have to be sensitized about the majority of people who are not design professionals who would be working in the same space and with whom they will have to break their heads about how to bring about changes in policy for the betterment. But we would still love to hear what the architects would have to say for this. Sonali Bhagwati, how would you feel about this? Sensitizing senior students in school about design for future policy.
I think anyone about design is always a good thing because design is so universal. I mean, architecture is the mother of all arts. So sensitizing them is never a bad idea. But whether it is going to be because they will work with policy makers or they are going to be the policy, that is a bit far-fetched. So I think sensitizing design is very good for the soul, for the mind, for the body, everything. So to sensitize someone on design or any aspect of design is never a bad idea.
Great. Sonali, do you have a couple of comments on this?
No, I mean, I think Sonali has summed it up very well. I'm in full agreement.
Perfect. So I think with that, we address almost all the questions that came into the chat. Quite a few questions there. Thank you. We had a very interactive audience. But yes, we were actually hoping this conversation to be lasting a maximum of 60 to 70 minutes. And we've actually gone 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I think I'm very happy to say that this is an extremely interactive, enterprising, insightful, and fantastic conversation. And I'm sure people who have been listening into us, who also have their questions and their answers and everything, they must have learned quite a bit. They must have got some amount of clarity. And I'm very happy that we had so many participants signing in. Thank you, Koelika. Thank you, Sonali and Sabina, for being on this platform. I can't believe that I was lucky enough that, you could give me, so much of your time, considering, how things have been working out at all ends. Everybody's busy.
We're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere.
I'll get the bottle of red wine and the kebabs. What kind of kebab?
Well, we could end with a glass of wine in our hands.
Yeah, next time, whenever we meet on whatever forum.
Next time, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for being.
Thank you.
And
it'd be great to just get together to just chat about things sometime.
Yes, like I mentioned earlier, I've got this idea about how we could make these ideas of how things need to change, or what are the kind of difference that the community could make to policies and all, all of this, how we can bring that together in documentation format. I do have an idea on this, and I'm going to touch base with you on this.
Let's do that. Ranjita, we'd love to hear this.
Yeah,
yes.
Likewise.
So yes, I'm going to touch base with you on this the next 24 hours, probably by Sans daylight tomorrow, and tell you what I feel, what we should do, and see how we can make it official to a point where people are forced to sit up and take notice, and the relevant people, not the ones, who will talk about it, but the ones who will be forced to actually look over it and pass it over to a point of implementation. Most of the times I see that, I have 10 people who talk to me about certain things, and I keep telling them one thing over and over again. If it is the architecture fraternity, if it is about design, if it is about understanding how policies work in this country, it is about how diplomats work in this country, how bureaucrats work in this country, I said, don't talk. We've talked enough. We've heard enough. It is time for us to do something, and we're not doing it because everybody is expecting the other person to do it. We don't want to talk controversy. We don't want to go, candid and, right out there and in your face. I just fail to understand the fear factor. It is eventually our own house, our own city, our own state, our own country, our own lives. And the fact that we pay taxes for this life to our own government, and we are trying to make a difference. So I was just scared about stating as to what we feel could make a difference. So I want to go out there and I want to state that fact, and I want to put it together. So like I said, we're going to touch base in the next 24 hours and figure out a way of how to make this a booming noise.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye, girls.
Bye.